In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most beneficent. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Al-Udhiyah sacrifice and some of its rules. All thanks and praise is due to Allah, the Lord of all exists, and the peace and the blessing of Allah be upon our Prophet Muhammad, his family, and all his companions. We would like to stress that Al-Udhiyah sacrifice one of the great rituals of Islam, in which we remember the Tawheed, oneness of Allah, His blessings upon us, and the obedience of our father Abraham to his Lord. And in this act of Udhiyah, there is much goodness and blessings. So the Muslim must pay attention to its great importance. The following is a brief look at this important ritual. Al-Udhiyah sacrifice is required that the sacrifice be from a livestock, cows, camels, sheep, and goats, offered as a sacrifice. A cow and camel, each of them is sufficient for 7 people. And it is as an act of worship dedicated solely to gain pleasure of Allah. Udhiyah takes place during the period from after the Eid prayer on the day of Nahr or Eid al-Adha until the last day of days of Tashriq, the 13th day of Zul Hijjah, with the intention of offering sacrifice. Allah says in Holy Quran, "Therefore turn in prayer to your Lord and sacrifice to Him only." Al-Kawthar chapter, verse number 2. He also says, "Say, O Muhammad, verily my prayer, my sacrifice, my living and my dying are for Allah, the Lord of Al-Alameen, mankind, jinn, and all that exists." Al-An'am chapter, verse number 162. And also he says, "And for every nation we have appointed religious ceremonies, that they may mention the name of Allah over the beasts of cattle that He has given them for food. And your Lord is one Lord, so you must submit to Him alone in Islam." Al-Hajj chapter, verse number 34. Udhiyah is the confirmed sunnah mu'akkada. According to the majority of scholars, some scholars say it is obligatory. The basic principle is that it is required at the appointed time from one who is alive on behalf of himself and the members of his household, include the alive and the dead, in the reward. The origin of that is the sacrifice of the Prophet Muhammad, peace of Allah and blessing be upon him, for himself and his family, which included the dead. The second is to sacrifice for the dead in order to fulfill their will, bequest. The origin for this is Allah's saying, "Then whoever changes the bequest after hearing it, the sin shall be on those who make the change." Al-Baqarah chapter number 181. The third, some scholars said it is permitted to sacrifice for the dead as a grant, independently from the living. Conditions of Udhiyah sacrifice. Number 1, the animal should have reached the required age, which is 6 months for the lamb, 1 year for goat, 2 years for a cow, and 5 years for a camel. Number 2, it should be free of any faults, because the Prophet, blessing and peace of Allah be upon him, said, "There are faults that will not do for sacrifice: a one-eyed animal whose defect is obvious, a sick animal whose sickness is obvious, and a lame animal whose limb is obvious, an emaciated animal that has no marrow in its bones." Narrated by Bukhari. There are mild defects that do not disqualify an animal, but it is makruhated to sacrifice such animals, such as an animal with a horn or eye or ear missing, or an animal with slits in its ears, etc. Udhiyah is an act of worship to Allah, and Allah is good and accepts only that which is good. Whoever honors the rights of Allah, this has to do with the piety of the heart. Allah said, "It is neither their meat nor their blood reaches Allah, but it is piety from you that reaches Him." Al-Hajj chapter verse number 37. Number 3, it is forbidden to sell it. If an animal has been selected for sacrifice, it is not permissible to sell it or give it away, except in exchange for one that is best. If an animal gives birth, its offspring should be sacrificed along with it. It is also permissible to ride it if necessary. The evidence for this is the hadith of Messenger of Allah, blessing and peace of Allah be upon him, saw a man leading his camel and told him, "Ride it." He said, "It is for sacrifice." He said, "Ride it a second or third time." Narrated by Bukhari and Muslim. Number 4, it should be sacrificed at the specified time, which is from after the prayer and khutbah sermon of Eid until before the sunset on the last day of Tashriq, the 13th day of Zil Hijjah. The Prophet, peace and blessing of him, is reported to have said, "Whoever sacrifices before the prayer, let him repeat it." Narrated by Bukhari and Muslim. What should we done with the sacrifice? Number 1, it is commanded for the sacrificer after Eid prayer and sermon to direct his face towards the Qibla, Makkah, and directing the sacrifice to it. And this is preferable in every animal slaughtering. Then he says, when slaughtering, in the name of Allah, obligatory. Allah is great. This is from you and for you. It is commanded. From Sunnah, he should sharpen his blade. The Prophet, blessing and peace of Allah be upon him, said, "Verily Allah has prescribed al-ihsan, benevolence in all things. So if you kill well. And if you slaughter, then slaughter well. Let each one of you sharpen his blade, and let him spare suffering to the animal he slaughters." Narrated by Muslim. Number 2, it is preferable for one who has made a sacrifice not to eat anything on that day before he eats from it. Number 3, it is better for a person who to slaughter the sacrifice by himself, or he can make an agent to slaughter for him. Number 4, it is permissible for the sacrificer to eat from his sacrifice, save over, give charity, and the more you give charity, the better. The scholar agrees that it is not permissible to sell anything from its meat, fat, or skin. The butcher should not be given anything of it by the way of reward or pay, but as a gift it is permissible. Finally, my brothers, these are the most important rules of the sacrifice with which the servants draws close to Almighty Allah. And know that the household of sacrifice is a great worship and a ritual of great rituals and evidence of the piety of hearts. Allah Almighty said, "That is so, and whoever honors the rights of Allah, indeed it is from the piety of hearts." Al-Hajj chapter verse number 32. So make sure that Allah bless you to show it, slaughtering it openly, and do it yourself. Glory and honor to Allah Almighty, and the peace and the blessing of Allah be upon our Holy Prophet Muhammad and his family and all his companions.